I guess the long story short is over the last 5 years, I've grown from booking interviews as a freelancer to, running a multiple six-figure business with in-house employees. We're booking, several thousand interviews a year.
That is Jessica Rhodes, who runs a firm called Interview Connections. They help their clients get booked as a guest on podcasts. Let's say you want to raise your visibility by being on someone's show. Jessica's firm will come up with a list of podcasts that would be a good fit for your experience and the audience you're trying to reach. And then they work to build relationships with the hosts so they can get you booked as a guest. Their website is interviewconnections.com. Jessica, it is great to have you on the show.
Hey, Will, thanks so much for inviting me to talk with you and your audience.
So I was kind of surprised to find out about your firm. And, it hadn't even occurred to me that there was such a thing as someone who would help book guests onto podcasts. And I heard about your firm. And so before we dive into the questions, maybe just let's start there. Tell us a little bit about what your firm does.
Yeah, so it was as much of a surprise to me as it is to you when I started the business. I started my company, Interview Connections, in 2013, and my first business was a virtual assistant firm. I was working essentially freelance with entrepreneurs and small business owners, doing some social media marketing, client support, and really the goal for me was to be able to stay at home with my new baby and also have an income. So I started this VA business, and one of the services that I was offering was podcast interview bookings. I was helping my clients be booked as a guest on podcasts and also finding experts for them to have on their show. And after a few months of working as a virtual assistant, I wanted to make more money, but not just be working more hours or slowly increasing my hourly rate. And so my dad is a business coach, and so I was talking with him about, what can I do to really scale? Also keeping in mind I'm working from home with my baby. So as my baby's getting bigger, he's sleeping less, I'm working less hours. So I was kind of at this turning point of what can I do here? And of all the services that I was offering, I thought, people love being booked for interviews on podcasts. It's this thing that they're getting exposure, they're meeting people. You feel great. Like when you asked me to be on your show, I was like, awesome. So, it feels good when people want to feature you and ask you questions. So as an interview connector, I really enjoyed that work. And I also saw that there was a demand for it. Sometimes you have a great service to offer, but it's not the right time. So in this case, I had a great service and it was a good time. Podcasting was getting more popular. There were some business shows coming out that were really getting a lot of attention at the time. Entrepreneur on Fire had started within the last 6 months, and it was a smaller show at that time, but I booked some of my clients on it, kind of started to build a relationship with John Lee Dumas. And I really just, as I was building Interview Connections, I really was mindful about the podcasters that I was connecting with, building relationships with them, and just structuring my business in a way where I could be offering packages and not just working by the hour. So I guess the long story short is over the last 5 years, I've grown from booking interviews as a freelancer to, running a multiple six-figure business with in-house employees. We're booking, several thousand interviews a year on podcasts representing both entrepreneurs.
Wait, several thousand interviews per year?
Several thousand, yeah.
That's a lot of podcasts. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's insane how many podcasts there are.
Oh my gosh, several thousand. All right, let's dive into this a little bit. So first, what are the types of people that are using your service to get booked onto shows? Like, what are the types of people who are your clients?
Yeah. We're working with entrepreneurs and small business owners who see the value in growing a personal brand. So some of the kind of industries that we're working with, we have a lot of business coaches and consultants work with us because as a coach or a consultant, the value of having a personal brand because your clients will want to work with you when they know, like, and trust you, and they feel like they can really identify with who you are and not just the expertise that you have. So coaches and consultants, we work with agency owners who want to get more clients. We've got an advertising agency that's worked with us for years. They've gotten a huge ROI because they're out there talking about, tips around Google ads and converting leads on a website. And, when they're on that interview giving value, the host is like, wow, you know so much. I need this. Rather than just price shop at a million agency websites, it's logical to hire the agency who you just had on your podcast. So agency owners, also a lot of finance experts. It's really big. Real estate investors, wealth managers, because again, that's a niche where if you're going to trust someone with your investing or with your finances, someone to advise you on your investing, you want to feel like you know that person and that you can trust that person. So being a guest on podcasts is a really, really good way to build trust with people. So those are a few of the top industries or kinds of business owners that work with us.
Great. What are the types of podcasts that you get people, placed onto? And maybe talk a little bit about how that process works.
Yeah. So we book people on podcasts that are definitely well established because our clients are working with us as a way to grow their brand, to build their visibility, and to attract clients. For us, it's almost always very important that our clients are on shows that are well established, have been around for at least, 30 to 50 episodes. And with each client that we're working with, we really strategize with them around the kinds of shows that they want to be on. And for me, it always starts with the goal. For a client who's a podcaster and their one goal is to build their audience, and maybe it's a more general show, like our client Erica Mandy has a podcast called The Newsworthy, and she is sharing the news every day. So for her, the audience is very wide. It's not like one specific avatar of a client. It's like basically any American who wants to get updated on the news. So we're finding shows for her that have a large audience so she can build her podcast audience. But for a business owner who needs a new client, like let's just say a business coach who, if a new client signs on with them for a year, it's like 20, 30,000 in revenue. It doesn't matter so much how big the audience is. It's more about finding the podcast that's attracting the right kind of person. When a coach is on a podcast where there's 100 people listening, small, very targeted audience, but every person in that 100 person audience is an ideal candidate for them, then that is really good, because what people invest in to work with a booking agent like us, is, usually less than $20,000 a year. I'll say that. So you get a pretty good return if your clients are worth a lot to your business, because it only takes a couple people for the strategy to be worth it.
So how do you kind of keep track of the universe of podcasts to monitor, like, what would be a good one for others? Are there tools out there? And I should know this by now, but are there tools out there that tell you like how many listeners different podcasts have, or the types of profile of people, or do you just have to sort of judge who is probably listening to podcast XYZ based on, listening, description of it or something?
Yeah. That's a great question. And that's honestly the most time-consuming part of what we do. And that's a big reason why people hire us, because that takes so much time to really figure out, is a podcast worth it? Unfortunately, right now, podcasts don't have public download stats. I say that unfortunately because people want to know. But at the same time, it's not super important how big the audience is. And you can kind of get a sense of how big their following is when you look at their Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn presence, when you see how many iTunes ratings and reviews they have. Those are some of the, hard stats that we look at when we're evaluating a podcast. Also, looking at how many episodes a podcast has, that also says a lot, because, let's just say a podcast they've been going for 3-4 years. They've been around a while. I mean, I've been podcasting since 2014 and I have around 200 downloads an episode. I've got a really niche topic though. I'm talking about podcasting. So the number of people that want to listen to a show about podcasting is like a lot smaller, but because I've been podcasting for, 4 years now, my audience is very engaged. So it's a small number of people, but they they're like, yeah, I've been listening to you since it was called Roads to Success. Like, I know so much about you and your show. So that's, it's good to be in front of an audience that is really engaged. So sometimes it's about the engagement. Other times you just want to be in front of as many people as possible. Internally, systems are really big. So it's funny, we're hiring right now in our business. And one of the things that we're looking for in our next employee is somebody that's really good with systems, because on the back end, when it comes to booking interviews, you have to keep this all organized. We use a CRM, we use HighRise. And so every email pitch that we're sending is getting logged in HighRise. We're updating profiles of every person we're reaching out to. So, I think we have tens upon thousands of, profiles in our CRM of people we've contacted, bookers, podcasters. And so over the last several years, we've just been building up that database and tracking. We're starting, while podcast download stats aren't public, we have relationships with so many podcasters. So we start to ask people, how many listeners do you have on your show? Just so we can start to get a baseline of how many, downloads do podcasts have? Because people don't really know what's good and what's bad because they're not public. So we're starting to gather that information so we can have an idea.
Yeah. What about, so you've developed relationships with the podcasters, right? Mm-hmm. And presumably you would, it sounds like you would get, once you get one person on their show who was a great guest, you would probably work with them, I suppose, multiple times. So it's probably important for you to maintain your own reputation that you're sending them like a good guest, right? So how do you, I'm curious to hear, do you get feedback from the podcast host on how good the guest was, so that, even if somebody's your client, if they're like a really crummy guest, not very, eloquent, or don't, present well, then maybe you don't want to keep representing them, because you're really using your credibility when you introduce them to podcast hosts. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, you really hit the nail on the head there. As a booking agency, our reputation is impacted by our clients' I say performance in quotes because I don't like to think of interviews as performance, but for lack of a better word, of their interviews, people are going to, it's just like when you make a referral. I had a friend refer a potential client, and I'm like, okay, if we're going to work with them, it has to go really well because I don't want to damage my friend's reputation for referring, so it's the same thing when we're booking people on shows. We want to make sure that it goes really well. So, to start, we really qualify each booking that we go into really well. We have our clients approve of each podcast before we send a pitch, because we want to vet it in our way. And then we bring it to the client, say, hey, here's a show I found. I think it's a really good fit. Then they vet it. And so we're going into the pitch prepared. The client is going into the interview prepared because they've already screened the show and made sure, okay, this would be a good fit. I could really do this show very well. The other thing that we do is our clients apply to work with us. So there's a lot of people that book interviews. There's a lot of other agencies. We're more high end. We have all of our clients apply to work with us. I have a phone conversation with everyone before they become a client. And, it doesn't happen that often, because by the time someone gets on the phone with me, we've vetted them enough. We look at their website, we check them out and make sure we'd be able to represent them successfully. But, I've had people apply to work with us. I go to their website and just realize, we wouldn't be able to get them on good shows, or it just wouldn't be a good match. And I've said, thank you so much for reaching out. We are not the right agency for you. And I'll refer them to another company to see if there's another, booker that might be able to represent them. So we won't take people on as a client if they are not a good guest. But, it happens. Everyone's human. There have been, sometimes there are bad connections that are made and we get bad feedback. And again, this is very rare, but, we handle that. And sometimes we'll replace the booking, for the client. We bring it to them because as their booking agent, we want to do them the respect of letting them know, hey, this didn't go well, and let's talk about what happened. And sometimes it's just two people, they're really great, but they just don't click, or somebody had a bad day and it just didn't go well. I remember that happened with one of my clients. I booked him on a show, great relationship with the client, great relationship with the show. Everything said it should have gone well, but something was off that day and it didn't go well. And I even heard the recording. I had the host send me the raw recording because he wasn't going to publish it. And I was like, yep, that was off. I gave the client some good tips, and and he had a lot of great interviews, got great feedback from other hosts, but that one something just didn't click between them. And sometimes that just happens, you do your best matchmaking, but not everything is a marriage.
So what are some of your tips to your clients on how to be a great guest and how to make a great performance, to use that term?
Yeah, so it starts with just going into the interview space really prepared, and just having the ability to focus. So, we're on the phone right now. My laptop's closed. My phone's on airplane mode. Like, there are no distractions happening here. So number one, it's just having the ability and just setting yourself up for success when it comes to just focusing and listening. I ran a panel at PodFest on how to interview. And one of the biggest tips that we have for interviewers is just listen. And I would say it's the same for a guest. Just listen really carefully and to the question so you can answer it. And my other thing.
I was going to make a joke. Like, what were you saying? Sorry.
No, exactly. The same thing happened on the panel. One of my panelists was like, "What did you say?" And I was like, "What did I say? I said to listen." But the other thing is in the pre-interview conversation, that's a very, very important time to go into the interview prepared. And, you and I handled that beautifully. You prepared me. You let me know what to expect. I asked them clarifying questions. I always ask, how long will the interview be? I have it on my calendar for 55 minutes. Let me know if that has changed at all, because I like to know if it's going to be an hour, I'm not going to give super short answers, but if it's 30 minutes, I'm not going to talk forever. So it's always good to clarify the time, who the target audience is, and hey, how can I make this interview really good for your listeners? Like, what do you want to get out of this conversation? And as a guest, going into each interview with the full intention and goal of giving value to their audience, that is the best thing you can do as a guest. Just focus on being a giver of value. Don't worry about what am I going to get out of this? Am I going to be able to promote my stuff? Just focus on giving value. It's the whole thing. Like, when you give, there's the power of reciprocity. Just give without expecting anything in return, and you will ultimately get more in the future.
So those all make total sense. This is fascinating. Wow. I guess there must have been, media bookers with TV, and there still are, I'm sure, people. Now, do you only work with, typically in this industry, do you only work with clients who want to be on the show? Or there are some agents, or maybe you would work for shows trying to find good guests?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of our business, probably 80% of our clients, are guest experts. We get them on shows. That's just a service that's in higher demand. I think a lot of podcasters, there's not as much of a demand for podcasters who need a booker. A lot of podcasters will do that on their own. That being said, we do have clients that use our services and we find guests for their show. We have a client who just signed up. He's starting a podcast and he wants to interview really interesting people like singer-songwriters, actors, things like that. And so he's using us, and we're finding people that matches criteria, proposing them to him. And then when he approves, we go out and get them booked on his podcast. So we do it. We, book from both sides of the mic, so to speak. So that's cool. We do both. Yeah.
How do you measure the impact of being on a podcast?
Yeah, that's another really good question, because, this is a marketing service that is a little bit more challenging because it's not always super clear and straightforward when it comes to measuring results. People are used to investing in Facebook ads and Google ads and things like that, and knowing if I put X number of dollars per click, I'm going to get this out. There's a stat and a data around what the ROI is. And I just have never been able to figure out how to give people that ROI, because what you get from podcast interviews are relationships. And just like in your personal life, you get out of a friendship what you put into it. If you never call your friends from high school, you're not going to get much out of those friendships other than, hey, at Christmas once a year. So it's the same thing with the relationships that you form by being a guest on podcasts. You need to put work into them to get, clients and business out of them. keeping in touch with the host, really giving value, listening to their podcast and leaving them a rating and review. Like, you want to give a lot, put a lot into that relationship. And in turn, they'll refer people to you. They'll maybe hire you. We have a lot of clients who the host ends up becoming a client, and that's amazing. And that's actually why I talk a lot about how the number of people in the audience isn't as important, because a lot of times it's the host who you end up engaging with. So no pressure, Will, but but it really is about the relationship, and the host is typically the only person, unless it's like a live show where there's listeners interacting. The host is the only person that you actually talk to and have a two-way conversation with. So that's really the person that you want to be focusing on the most. So the ROI is great. I mean, by this time, I've been in business for about 5 years now. I've got tons of testimonials of people that say, oh, I've got multiple speaking engagements that came from the connections I made on podcasts. I've got coaching clients that came from the connections I made on podcasts. I've sold, I've had 300,000 downloads of my Kindle book because I mentioned on every podcast. So there's all those examples, but there's not like one clear way to describe the ROI, because everyone's business is different. And at the end of the day, we can make the best match possible, but the guest has to deliver the right content. They have to give the call to action in a way that the listeners actually want to take it. So there's a lot of factors involved, but I hope that answered your question.
Talk to me about the call to action. Is it something like, hey, any listeners on the show, email me at this address and I'll send you like a free ebook, or I'll send you a diagnostic tool, or I'll send you something free, something like that. Tell me about different calls of action that you've seen be successful.
Yeah. So I would say the most common and the most popular is to have a landing page. Landing pages convert better because there's not a million different tabs to click, and people don't get distracted. They can just go, they opt in, they download. And that is great if you have a successful email marketing strategy where you convert your email leads into your service or your product purchase. So I would say if you have a good email marketing strategy, you've got a good funnel set up, focus on getting people to a landing page so they get on your list, and then your funnel will do its work. I don't really focus on my email marketing strategy that much. My clients don't tend to be on my email list very long, if at all, before they sign up. So I don't usually give a strong call to action to a landing page. I usually invite people to my website, or if I think that it's an audience where they're probably interested, I'll invite them right to the website to check it out, and they can apply if it's a good fit. Or if it's an audience where I don't think they're ideal clients, but they would like my podcast, I'll say, hey, go to, you can listen to my podcast and get tips from me and my team every week. So the call to action needs to be relevant to the audience and to what your goal is, what you want people to do. But it should be clear. You don't want to give a million calls to action. I was talking to a client yesterday and he's like, why haven't I seen results? And I said, well, the one podcast I heard you do, you told them to do like 5 things. And I left very confused.
Yeah.
Hey, you can call me here. This is my email. This is my website. The website has like a million different pages. So you just don't want to leave listeners confused.
So calls to action would be it sounds like your favorite that you recommend to your clients would be have a landing page that you mentioned on the air. Go to this website.com and enter your info, and I'll send you a free book or something, white paper tool. How is a landing page different than a website? I should probably know the answer to this, but
no, that's okay. So a landing page is just when you go to it, there's not like my website, for example, you go, there's tabs at the top. You can click to my blog. You could go to my FAQs. The landing page wouldn't have all those tabs and options. It would just be like a headline and a place to put in your name and email. Like, it would just, the only purpose to that landing page is to get someone to download something and to opt in. So there's only one option for what the person would do when they get to that page. Whereas on a website, they can click to the podcast, they can click to the blog, they can go to About Us. There's a lot of different places that they can look at.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned it, I think, quickly in passing, but let's make sure that we got it. Tell us your website and your podcast.
Yeah. So my website is interviewconnections.com. And my podcast is called Rock the Podcast. It is it's really our company show. So I'm on the podcast. My employees also host it with me. Sometimes they'll host it without me. So, and we feature interviews with our clients about how they're leveraging podcast interviews, the results that they're seeing. So a lot of the episodes are sort of case study based, so you can hear from real people that are using the strategy and seeing results.
Talk to us a little bit more about that. Give us some more stories from people that you've helped get on podcasts and the kind of results or impact that they've seen.
Yeah, definitely. So our client, Tanya Connor Green, is a business coach. And I love her because when she came to work with us, she had started her coaching business maybe a year and a half ago. She had never been on a podcast before as a guest. She has her own show that she co-hosts, but she had never been a guest. So she was a little nervous. But again, I had a call with her. I knew she'd be a great guest. And we said, hey, we'll interview you on our show. So your first interview is not with somebody else. It's like with us. And so you can kind of get your feet wet and be comfortable. She did a great job. And we were booking her on like 2 or 4 shows per month. And the thing about podcasting is that people record interviews. It takes time for the producer to edit it, for it to go live. So even getting booked on podcasts for a few months, it takes time to see results because they're not all going live yet. So for her, we had been booking her for like 3 to 4 months. She had been doing the interviews, but they weren't going live. And around her 5th or 6th interview that she recorded, she had seen an 8x return on her investment with us. One of the hosts hired her to do a paid training for her clients. So Tanya went on the show, talked about Facebook ads, and the host was like, I would love to pay you to train my clients on this. So she got a client there. I think that same host also said, I was looking for a coach and you have what I need and I really like you. So the host became a coach and client of hers. Tanya also found a business coach. She had been looking for a business coach to help take her to the next level. So on the podcast interview, she found someone that was a good fit. So that was an investment she made, but it was something she was looking for. So Tanya is one of the most recent, like really big success stories that we have. Also, our client, Dave Sanderson, is a speaker. He was the last passenger off the flight that landed in the Hudson River, I think in 2009. And he became an author. He wrote a book about it. He is a motivational speaker. And through the podcast interviews, he's had hosts that will say, oh my gosh, you have to connect with this person. I think they'd really like to have you come in and speak. So he's gotten at least 2 paid speaking opportunities from the interviews that he's done on podcasts. And then, we have other clients that stick around with us for years. And they, Ty Crandall owns a business doing business credit and financing. And I can't remember what the percentage is, like 20% of his clients come from podcasting. And he hosts his own show. He guests on other shows. So it's good to do it from both sides of the mic because when you're a guest, you're getting in front of new audiences. And then those listeners can come over and listen to your show and they can just get to know you even more. Because just hearing one interview isn't always enough for people to know if they want to work with you. But if you get them over to your podcast, you can really deliver more value to them and give them those consistent calls to action. So those are a few examples of people that are doing it consistently, seeing results. And, other people just see a lot of results when it comes to building their brand. They're getting backlinks to their website as they're guesting on shows. Podcasters are putting links to their website, and that's really good for their SEO. And they're showing up in search results because they're just showing up in more places.
What are some other ways that you recommend beyond your own service and beyond being on podcasts when you advise your clients on sort of the full portfolio of raising their visibility? What are some other things that you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I really encourage my clients to create content, speak about your topic and go to conferences and get out of your office. So in regards to creating content, writing blog posts and writing articles on LinkedIn. I've been a lot more active on LinkedIn as of late, and it's been great. You just get people messaging you, commenting, and it's a good, when you work with entrepreneurs, when you are sort of in a business community, that's obviously a great platform to be active on, even if it's not as fun as Instagram. It's a good place to be for business reasons. So just being active and posting articles Being active on social media and just being in conversations, I think is really good because, I've said this multiple times, but podcast interviews are all about the relationships. So people want to have guests on their show that they want to have a conversation with. So being active in conversations and also being out there at events, at conferences, and building relationships face to face. Because if you can't be speaking at conferences and at live events, doing podcast interviews is like the next best thing because you can be speaking to an audience without having to get on a plane and go travel. But for a lot of my clients, they speak on podcasts and then they go to a conference and they see they meet all the podcasters that have interviewed them. They're now meeting them in person, which just like is awesome. You deepen the relationship so much. So those are some of the things. And then just leveraging the media opportunities that you're getting by sharing the episodes, the interviews that you've done, getting links to the interviews you've done on podcasts onto your website, create a press page or put them on your about page. So that way, when people find your website, they can also see that you've been booked and you've been interviewed on podcasts.
Okay. So writing, speaking, go to conferences, blogs, video. Talk to me about video. What do you see happening there? I've heard that video is kind of the new thing.
Yeah, video is great. So I did videos. I produced weekly videos for like 3 years. I called it Interview Connections TV, and every single week I'd post a new video. It's like 2-3 minutes, just a quick tip. It wasn't like highly produced or anything. For a while I used a camcorder, and then after a while, like the iPhone was so good, so I just used my phone and a lavalier microphone. And I just gave tips and I just produced that content. And I had people that just loved the videos because they didn't want to listen to a 30-minute podcast about it, but they loved getting those quick tips from me. So that's great. I mean, I think the difference now is it's all about live streaming and Facebook Live and Instagram Live. So, and I hear that from clients I have that say, Facebook Live that's where you got to be, because people want to be interacting with you live. It's raw, it's real. You can't like perfect everything. You just need to be there and you can be interacting with people. So I think that's great. And I even see people that have Facebook Live shows like my friends Lindsay Phillips and Lindsay Anderson. They do every Thursdays Marketing and Merlot, and it's a show. They'll bring on guests, but it's on Facebook Live. And they'll be talking about marketing. And then you've got this live, date and time every week. So it's a little bit different than podcasting or a pre-recorded show. But it's just it's a different and unique way to build relationships and to be delivering content.
So talk to me about, I'm curious to hear your own productivity tips and habits. You've got to be organized, as a mom running a business. You started this kind of right with a little one in the house. Talk to me about some of the routines that really have worked for you.
Yeah. So I've gotten a lot better on this recently. So I'm really I live and die by my Google Calendar. Like I schedule my whole day out. Obviously it starts with the, scheduled calls. So one thing that I do is I do all of our sales calls. So when I'm meeting, when people apply to work with us, I'm the person that they talk to. And so I block out specific days or specific times of each day that people can schedule a sales call. And those blocks of time are sacred. Like within, I think it's like maybe 10:30 to 2:30 on a Wednesday. That's when people can schedule a sales call. And if I don't have sales calls, that's when I'm doing my follow-up. So I keep those blocks for sales work sacred. I don't schedule other stuff in. And then I put like podcast interviews and blog writing and social media marketing around those blocks. And then usually like Friday or Thursday, the week before, or the couple days before the next week starts, I'll look at my calendar for the next week and think about, all right, what are those things that are important, but not like pants on fire emergency that I want to make sure I get done, and I'll find blocks and I'll schedule it in. So that way I know they're getting done. And, I don't know if you're familiar with the Landmark Forum, but that is something that I have done this year. I did the forum and the advanced course. And a big thing that you learn at Landmark is integrity and putting a word in the matter. And really all we have is our word. So I look at that. I really use that philosophy with my scheduling of my day. When I say I'm going to do my blog writing at this time and this day, I do it. It's not like, oh, maybe I'll get it done that day. I'd say, and my business partner's the same way. It was so funny. I sent her a message on Slack and I was like, hey, did you call this person? She goes, it is on my calendar for this afternoon. And that is when I will do it. So that's really how we operate as far as productivity. And it's sort of it's like a very obsessive compulsive way to like live your day, but I get so much done because I schedule it in and I don't let the day just be whatever comes at me.
Any morning routines?
Yeah. So my morning routine, I've got 2 kids now. My son is 5 and my daughter is 2.5. So, the morning routine is really getting up, drinking coffee, eating breakfast. I really take it easy in the morning. I don't get to the office until 10. So waking up around 7 a.m., I love taking those 3 hours to like get the kids' lunches ready, get them dressed, slowly drink my coffee and get ready for the day, maybe play with them a little bit. So I kind of take it easy. Like that's family time in the morning. Sometimes it's the kids watching TV and me doing other stuff, but it's just like, it's sort of a relaxed morning. This week, I tried something new because I do yoga. That's what I love to do for meditation and mindfulness and exercise. And the yoga studio that I go to just started offering 6 a.m. classes. And I went for the first time on Thursday at 6 a.m. So I would like to do that more. So that's sort of my goal is to a couple days a week go to 6 a.m. yoga because it's something I can go and get done. And then I don't have to think about like, oh, am I going to go after work today? And because there's other stuff going on after work. So that's sort of my morning routine. I hope when my kids are older, I can maybe have a stricter schedule, but that's what I do.
Talk to me about any tools, apps, software, websites that you love. You talked about Google Calendar. Maybe do you any kind of scheduling tool like Calendly or any other kind of apps that you love?
So I use Schedule Once and I use Calendly for a little while. I've tried both of them. I'm back to Schedule Once because I've noticed I just like their ability to say, to kind of block in, like I said, with my sales call times, I can block in when I offer times for people to schedule for different types of meetings. So I like Schedule Once for that. I also like, and yes, Google Calendar, but if I'm just like on the go and I think of something and I don't want to like open up the Google Calendar app on my phone, I just use Siri reminders. Siri reminds me to do so much and I love it. So like when I just think of something, hey Siri, remind me to, whatever. So that's great because if I don't write it down or if I don't have somebody remind me like Siri, it's not going to stay in my head. So I use Siri reminders. In the business, we use Slack. So Slack is a great way to just be messaging back and forth and making sure stuff gets recorded.
Talk to me about any books that have either really impacted you or that you've frequently gifted. Yeah.
So the best book that I read over the last year that really just like my mind was blown. And it just kind of put me on this new trajectory of mindfulness was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And this, not necessarily like a business book, but I think this is the best book for people to read because it really just talks, the title explains it, but it really just talks about how, the past is in our past. We can't do anything about it. The future hasn't happened yet. All we have is right now. So being totally focused and in the moment, it's just absolutely incredible what that does when you truly live very, very mindfully. After I read that book, I started learning about meditating and meditating more and just learning how to control, I look at meditating as a way to exercise your brain because we can so often just our brain just goes crazy. We're thinking about other things. So the more you meditate, the more you can train your brain to only focus on what you're doing and what you're talking about, what you're doing right now, as opposed to thinking about what am I going to eat for lunch in an hour? So The Power of Now is a great book for people that kind of want to start learning about that. And then there's other books that I've read, like When Things Fall Apart was the next book I read after that, which kind of took it to a new level. But I would highly recommend that book because I think being present is a very big benefit for entrepreneurs to have.
It's probably difficult for you to pick a few favorites, but any podcasts that you're currently loving?
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard to pick. I love podcasts. So one show that I really enjoy listening to is called The Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. He's an actor. He has a lot of celebrities on his show. His wife is Kristen Bell, who's pretty famous. So I really like listening to that show because he's very he really digs into people's story and what about your past made you who you are today. It's entertaining, but it's also thought provoking. So I like that podcast. I also like Oprah's podcast, Super Soul Conversations. Again, just a lot about mindfulness and spirituality. So I really like that show. Yeah, those are probably two of my favorite podcasts that I listen to pretty regularly.
Awesome. Can you give us a sense? I imagine it might vary, depending on specifics, but can you give us a sense for somebody who wanted to, to get booked on shows? Roughly, how does the pricing for a service like your firm offers work?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're recording this in it's almost May of 2018. So if you're listening to this in the future, these prices might be different. Our prices, they do change over time. But, right now we have got monthly membership options and we have launch package options. So people can pay for all their bookings up front, get a little bit of a discount, or pay month to month. We start with the discovery process, which we value at $1,000. And that's where we do all the strategy and intake work. We do their one sheet design and really just lay that foundation. And we charge $1,300 a month for 4 bookings. So about $325 each. And then again, if you purchase 15 or more bookings up front with your discovery process as well, then there's a little bit of a discount. So yeah, that's what our investment is right now as we're recording it.
All right, cool. So it's sort of roughly around, $350 per booking, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting. Fascinating. So thousands of bookings per year. That just blows my mind that there's that there's that many podcast drops in the ocean of podcasts.
There's so many, and there's more just starting all the time. So it's just, it's crazy how many opportunities there are for people to be connecting on podcasts.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, Jessica, this has been awesome. I mean, you've opened up a world to me that, I've been doing a podcast now for about a year, and that I didn't know existed. So it's really interesting business that you've started, and it sounds like you were one of the early ones. Who would have thought to start a podcast booking service? And so thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share so much about my business. So I really appreciate it, Will.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. Unleashed is sponsored by Umbrex, the world's first global community of top-tier independent management consultants. The mission of Umbrex is to create opportunities for independent management consultants to meet, share lessons learned, and collaborate. I'd love to get your feedback and hear any questions that you'd like to see us answer on this show. You can email me at unleashed@umbrex.com. That's UMBREX.com. If you found anything on the show helpful, it would be a real gift if you would let a friend know about the show and take a minute to leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And if you subscribe, our show will get delivered to your device every Monday. Our audio engineer is Dave Nelson. Our theme song was composed by Gary Negbauer, and I'm your host, Will Bachman. Thanks for listening.